Welcome to Into the West, a Middle Earth SVG podcast where we discuss the competitive side of the game. My name is Charles. With me today, Richard, Ian, and a special guest, Ben. We are back after a break. This is the beginning of a new season. I guess it's season 3 now, and yeah, we have some pretty nice topics to share this time. So for our main topic, we'll be going over a tournament that we played at locally in Vancouver, Canada, and it's called Clash on the Coast. It's our biggest event ever in our local group, and also I think of Canada as well. So it was a really epic event. We had 52 players, and it was 800 points, and we'll each be sharing one of the games that we played at the tournament today. And then in our open topic, we'll be discussing playstyles versus points values.
For our new season, we're trying out this new format. So for the people who are listening on audio, you can go on our YouTube channel as well, which might help a lot. Listening to our battle reports, we'll have some visuals to go along with it. So let us know what you guys think of this format. If you guys think that, our faces are better for audio, also let us know. But yeah.
Yeah, if you are checking this podcast out on video, we'll also have our army list on the screen. So you don't necessarily have to go to our Facebook page to look it up, but it'll still be up on our Facebook page, Into the West podcast, if you are tuning in through audio and you want to follow along. All of our lists will be there. So to kick off the episode, we'll do a quick introduction for Ben and a few questions before we start talking about the event. So Ben, welcome to the podcast, and you've been a part of our local group for a long time. How did you get into the hobby? Because I can't remember when you started showing up at our tournaments.
Yeah, so my brother and I got into the hobby when I believe he was 8 and I was 9 years old. So this was just not the Return of the King edition, but the edition that came out after, where they kind of consolidated the 3 movies into that one book with the ring on it. So yeah, my brother was out grocery shopping with our mom. I was home with my dad, and yeah, he stumbled across one of those Lord of the Rings magazines. It had Theodred in it on a horse, and we were big Lord of the Rings fans. And so my mom was like, "Cool, buy it for him." And he painted it up. And my mom, being super into arts and crafts, thought he did a phenomenal job painting it, and was like, "Oh, we got to get you more of these." And it kind of, several allowances and birthday money expenses later, we started playing regularly. So that's how we got into it. And then we lived in New Zealand at the time. And then 2014, we moved back to Canada. And then in 2000 and either at the end of 17 or beginning of 18, it was right before the new edition came out. One of the locals, who was it? I'm sure his name will come to me, but one of the guys saw us playing. My brother and I, we just decided to meet for a game at Games Workshop, and he's like, "Hey, are you part of the West Coast Hobbits?" We're like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, there's a tournament coming up." So we both joined the Facebook group, and we both showed up at that tournament. And my first game was against Alex, one of the other regular hosts on this podcast. And haven't missed too many tournaments since.
So I got a mini follow-up question.
Yeah.
Does your parents regret introducing you guys to arts and crafts?
It's a great question. I believe maybe if there were a few years following, our first fuse into the game, maybe they did, because every single dollar of allowance and every single birthday money that could have been saved for a first car definitely went into models. But nowadays, I think they're kind of relieved that all of the money that we spent as kids wasn't just like, oh, they bought a bunch of toys and then they wasted their money. Like I still have all my models from when I was little, and I still use them. So it's kind of it's turned into more of an investment. So yeah, it's good. Good question.
So I think I can't remember the last time that I went to a tournament and I didn't see Ben there. So I know you're a big fan of tournaments and competition. What do you like most about competitive gaming, like the competitive side of MESBG?
Yeah, I mean, I was that guy that growing up who I never played single player games. I only played video games if it was with friends. And so I think that's I just love going and feeling like I'm learning something new, I'm contributing to something, and there's potentially prizes at the end that just keeps it so exciting for me. Even if the prizes are just a box of models that I could go and buy myself, like winning it at a tournament, I feel like I've earned something, and so it's super fun. So, and then plus, I don't know, there are lots of armies out there that my brother and I don't play, and so getting to see all these different paint styles, all these different play styles, yeah, it's great. It's just a great social hobby. So, yeah.
So over the years, I've seen you bring quite a variety of armies to events. Do you have a few favorites out of all the armies you own?
Yeah, so my COVID project, and when I say COVID project, I didn't own a single model from this list, not one. And I started a Azog's Legion list. It was one I always wanted to do. And it went from 0 models to, I believe, I now own both versions of Azog, so the stock foot and mounted plus the armored version. I have Bolg, I have 48 Gundabad Orcs, I got 4 Trolls, a Brute, a couple of Ogres, a couple of Bats. Pretty much every model they've made, I've got multiple of. So that army not only is my biggest money sink, but it is my most fun to play. It's a no nonsense. You don't sit back and shoot. You don't have these casters. It's just you run up to the enemy and you just slap them in the face as hard as you can, and you either die or they die, and that's game. And so yeah, that's definitely my favorite army. The army that I haven't played much in the last couple of years, but it's still one of my favorites. And actually, that's how I got introduced to you guys, was the fiefdoms. That was what you guys saw me play. I think I brought that to the first few tournaments. So that would be my other probably favorite list. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, really happy to have you on this episode, and looking forward to talking about the tournament.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add in, Ben and his brother Nick, I always feel like it's, the Into the West podcast, you two, and then, sometimes like, the Hammonds in Seattle, like we're just the main ones battling it out for podium spots on the West Coast. So if any of the listeners come to our tournaments, like, hey, I said Into the West podcast. But yeah, so you're definitely part of like the competitive group here. It's just I think you and your brother haven't traveled outside our regional tournaments as of yet.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, the local consensus group is there's always either Ian, a Lynn, or a Laktin on the podium, at least one. And I think at Toss Your Capers, game 1 was my brother against Charles and myself against Richard. And that was funny because the way we all saw it was, we're knocking 2 of us out of the round 1. So it was good.
Yeah, hopefully you or Nick will see one of you or both of you come on one of our trips to Nova Open or something like that. That'd be fun.
I so badly want to do that. Portland, I am driving to Portland for sure. So.
All right, so let's jump into our main topic today, where we'll talk about the grand tournament we had about a few weeks ago, Clash on the Coast. So we'll each talk about one of the games, but before we jump into the games that we selected, how did we feel about this overall tournament? I mean, we've never had an event even half as big as this in Vancouver, and it just seems like, it feels really nice to not have to get on a plane and fly to the other side of the continent to compete in like a large tournament. It was really exciting for me.
I totally agree. You guys obviously fly and participate a lot in the, I'd say international, but Ian flew to Australia, and then you guys fly over to the West Coast, or the East Coast, sorry, which is awesome. I haven't been there, so yeah, it's definitely, I've only experienced, 20 something player tournaments. So being able to experience a 50 plus player tournament it was so cool. So, and you're right, I was a 45-minute drive for me, so it's great.
Well, yeah, driving 20 minutes and going to a tournament that big was sick. That was the best thing. But just the spectacle. You kind of forget like the spectacle of having that many people playing like one game in like a big room like that if you don't go to it for a while. So it's like, yeah, it's really excited, and I want to play more tournaments again now. So very, very exciting stuff. Also, to clarify, I didn't fly to Australia just to play in a tournament. I was going to Australia, and I made sure I was gonna play in a tournament there because, going to Australia, there's people there, but it wasn't specifically for that.
That's fair. And I think your sentiments, from what I've seen, so many people left that tournament on this high. They were like, I can't wait for the next one. So, yeah.
And like a lot of buzz too, in a lot of the smaller communities that are kind of adjacent to us now. Like the few people who came from there are like, okay, we're getting into this. We're making more events. You guys got to come down here. It's really exciting.
Totally. Even Pat in Portland, he's now got a GT happening. It's a 40-player limit in February. It sounds like they're going to do one in Seattle probably in May or June sometime. So the fact that in 1 year we're probably going to see 3 40-plus person tournaments is really cool. Even I'm running a doubles tournament come in a couple weeks. And I'll be honest, when I talked to you guys and talked to Max, and I was like, hey, like, let's I want to host a tournament. Let's see what we can do. Oh, what do you got? Oh, Ben, what do you want to do? And I was like, oh, we're going to do doubles. And it was like crickets. They were like, that's going to be a hard tournament to sell, right? Like, people don't play doubles. And sure enough, like, I had a few people message me that they were interested. As soon as we had the GT, in a week and a half, I sold all 24 tickets. So yeah, I think it was a blessing being able to ride off of the hype from that GT. So yeah.
Okay, well, Ben, would you like to do the honors and go over your game first?
I'd love to, yeah. So let me just share my screen here. Okay. I'll just go over, I guess, orally what the list was. So I was running Azog's Legion. That was my, as I mentioned, it's my go-to list. I enjoy playing it the most, but I haven't had a lot of success in tournaments with it. So this was my debut. I was going to see what we could do. So my leader was Azog on the White Warg stock, no armor, no flail. I also had Bolg on a Fell Warg with a bow, and then they were accompanied by a total of 1 Ogre, 2 Warbats, 1 Gundabad Orc with a shield and a banner, 15 Gundabad Orcs with shields, and 14 Gundabads with spears. The philosophy of my list was I had a big meat shield of D6, followed up by spears, and then 1 banner. I had the 2 Warbats for kind of support. They were the closest I could get to having shooting in this list. So they could go and tag objectives. They could go and jump behind the enemy list and, snipe banners or pull heroes and spearmen off of big fights, things like that. So my sort of ranged units. And then I had 1 Ogre, which I didn't really use much in fighting. He was more of a utility. Just a big scary thing that usually warded enemies off of objectives and things like that. And then like I said, the utility list was just a big meat shield, stand there, die slowly. Meanwhile, Azog and Bull go and crunch as many units as possible. The list worked really well in the tournament. I won 4 out of my 5 games, so I had 3 minor wins, 1 major win, and 1 major loss. I finished 10th due to the major loss and 3 minor wins. I placed in the bottom of all the people with 4 wins. But I was pretty happy with 4 wins and 1 loss. I think that was a pretty good win ratio for the list. The game I'm going to talk about was the 5th game. It was the last game I played. I can't remember my opponent's name, and if my opponent listens to this podcast, I'm so sorry. Oh, actually, I do remember his name. His name was Ian. He's from the Seattle group, I believe. Yeah, hard to forget that name. He was running Thranduil's Halls. So he had Thranduil on foot. Oh, no, sorry, Thranduil on the elk with the sword. I do not believe he had the crown. Then he had Turiel with a bow and a Palace Guard captain with a shield. Supporting that army was 8 Rangers of Mirkwood. He had, I can't remember, somewhere between 6 and 8 armored Mirkwood armored elves with shields, and then he had like 12 to 14 Palace Guards with spears and shields. So the philosophy of his list was some shooting support from Turiel and Rangers, a meat shield of D6 elves in the front, tons of Palace Guards supporting, plus the captain, and then with Thranduil's bonuses, you're getting +1 to wound, and you're getting a fight 6 shield wall. So I can imagine this was a very solid list against most, most heroes would have had to consider striking against fight 6. So yeah, definitely a very solid, a very scary list to charge at. It was between 38 and 40 models. So I was going in on the back foot because he outnumbered me and his troops were a lot better than mine. The only advantage, and I was a little scared of Thranduil because the advantage I had in all my games was having 2 beatstick heroes. I had Bolg and Azog both with fight 7. Everyone had to strike to fight my big heroes, but Thranduil did not. Thranduil had the Elven Blade and the matched fight value, so that was the only game that I had to consider that. I had 36 models, so he outnumbered me by a few. The game was Assassination. I decided I wrote down Palace Guard Captain because it'd be the easiest to kill, but I crossed it out because I thought it's pretty obvious. It's the easiest thing to kill, right? 2 wounds, 1 fate, just a captain. Can't strike or call a defense or anything. He's probably just going to keep the captain back the entire game. So I picked Turiel because I figured he probably would guess it wouldn't be Turiel and keep her closer to the fight. This was a big mistake because he put his Palace Guard captain on his front line and fought him shoulder to shoulder with the rest of his army. And 3rd turn of the game, Bolg killed him in 1 turn of combat. And Bolg had to be my assassin because Azog was my leader. I guess I could have picked the White Warg, but I would have had to dismount Azog to get that kill. So I would have had 7 points on the board 3rd turn of the game had I stuck with my original choice. So that was my first blunder. The second mistake I made was I didn't consider that he would pick the White Warg. So if you can see on the screen here, you guys are good? You can see it, right? Cool. So I had, let's find a color. Okay, cool. So up top here, this was where Azog, the banner, and the first group was. So I had, the bats, the ogre, my leader, and the banners. This was kind of my main force. And at the bottom here, I had Bolg and the rest of my troops. So he had about 15 troops. He had anyways. The Rangers were all positioned up in the forest. So I figured I have the forest support, and he's kind of got his army awkwardly in the way because this was where the rest of the bulk of his army was. And then Thranduil was here at the back. So I figured, okay, Bolg's safe. He's not going to be able to shoot Bolg to death early game. It turned out he had chosen the Warg as his target, and the first turn of the game, Turiel called a heroic accuracy, and they fired all 9 shots. They put 2 wounds on the Warg and 2 wounds on Bolg. I fated. I put both of the fate points into the Warg. Azog had 1 wound left for the rest of the game. So right off the bat, he had a point for wounding my leader. I had almost lost what I now knew was his target. And it was the first turn of the game. So I was close to writing off the game right away. Eventually, I moved both my armies in as quickly as possible. I basically ran Azog right into the front lines. I fortunately lost priority, so he had to make his move first. And for some reason, even though he had the shooting advantage, he actually pushed his line kind of straight up. I'm sure he had some pretty good sound tactics for it. I would not have done that because Azog was then able to charge and then not take any more shots. But anyways, that happened. And then, Bolg kind of just ran through in between my soldiers and hit his front line as well. And then, my army kind of just did what it was supposed to do. I just stomped. Yeah, I think Bull got to 15 kills that game. The fight 6 is great, but against a fight 7 hero, it's no different than fight 2. Bull killed probably 7 or 8 of his flank, killed his captain, and then eventually ran around the back and started stomping on the back. Up here, I essentially just ran Azog and his list into the flank here. The Rangers sat back for a couple turns, just took a couple pot shots in the ways. I eventually hit them with my bats. I was only able to get 1 bat at a time in there because he had 1 sentinel that I forgot to mention was in his list, and I think I failed every courage test with my bats that he had done to make it run away. Eventually, as the game wore on, I was pretty conservative with Azog because I couldn't afford him to lose a fight. Eventually, Thranduil sort of wiggled his way through and came out to join the fight. And then 2 things happened. So the first thing that happened was there was a lone orc that had kind of fought his way in with a spear into the enemy lines. Turiel charged the orc, lost the fight. The orc wounded Turiel, and then he proceeded to roll 2 1s and a 2 for his 3 fate rolls. So she took a wound. I had points on the board because of 1 orc with a spearman. So then I felt better. I felt, okay, that first turn of ridiculous shooting is justified. Thranduil then proceeded to charge into 1 orc and Azog. I managed to pull Thranduil out of the fight by, sorry, he didn't charge. He charged Azog with a ranger and Thranduil, and then I charged Thranduil with an orc. So pulled Thranduil out of the fight. Azog beat his opponent, etc. But then the following turn, Thranduil charged in again and killed the White Warg. Yeah, I lost the fight. I was out of might, lost the White Warg. Azog survived. So he had his kill. It wasn't with his assassin, but I was, officially down 5 points. The following turn, I pinned Turiel. I think I took 2 attempts at the bats flying over to take hits at Turiel. I was unsuccessful. So I think it was 1 or 2 turns later, I pinned her with an orc, and then I charged with my ogre at an elf, won the fight, threw the elf at Turiel, and she took a wound and died. So we both had our targets. My leader was wounded, his leader was not. So it was, we were kind of on that, oh great, it's I'm losing again, but at least I'm not losing by as much as I was. Bolg was a monster and just kept killing. I eventually broke him, and then the game ended a couple turns later, and I think I was 1 or 2 models away from breaking, so I ended up winning the game. I believe that's 5 each for the, 5 for killing the target. He did kill, oh no, he didn't kill Azog, he wounded Azog, so he got 1 for that. And then I got 3 for breaking him. So I was 8 points to 6. I ended up winning the game. The reason I picked this game, I thought it was the most interesting and it was the one that I was the most stressed about the entire, for all my games throughout the whole tournament. I was even more stressed in the game that I lost because the game that I lost very early on, I knew I was going to lose. So they kind of accepted it. I learned very quickly, heroic accuracy is actually a decent heroic action. I never used it, but being able to shoot through 3 rows of orcs and put 2 wounds on or 4 wounds essentially on a big hero is not to be underestimated. I don't know if I learned a lesson on whether or not to pick the easy target. I think I was just unlucky. He decided I wasn't going to target his Palace Guard captain, so he threw him on the front lines. But other than that, though, the army worked exactly the way I thought it would. It was just Azog and Bolg getting tons of kills. First turn of the game, and this happened 3 out of my 5 games. The first turn of the game, I was at 8 kills, and my opponent was at either 0 or 1, because both heroes hit 2 models. They both hero could combated into 2 more and killed those guys. So it was just a stomping kind of list. That's essentially how the game went. Any questions from you guys, from the panel?
Great win. I think you made some pretty good calls, and that hurl at the end, I think, was probably the ogre won you over with that hurl.
Yeah, did almost
I
nothing the
just
entire tournament. Wins my last game. So.
that's awesome. It's awesome whenever a monster pays off, especially like a non-hero monster, because a lot of the times they're pretty disappointing to me. I just want to clarify though, in the FAQ, when you're shooting at a cavalry, you actually cannot use heroic accuracy to hit the mount. So, I I guess it may have made a difference. It may not have. He may have wounded the White Warg later on in the game, but um, he wouldn't have been able to, like, all the shots would have gone into Azog, or he would have to roll 50-50.
Yeah. So no, I'm glad you called that up to clarify. We did agree that he wouldn't be re-rolling on the rider amount. The third in the way was actually the banner. So I had 2 rows of orcs and then a banner. So yeah, it's the hero accuracy didn't make the difference for specifically targeting the warg. It did make the difference that he managed to get 5 shots through 3 rows of models. Yeah, good call out though.
I think you did pretty well because your model count is a little bit on the low side, right? It was under 40.
Yeah, I said 36 originally. It was 35. I remember now.
35.
It's 35.
Yeah, so that's pretty low against like a elite elven force. So I think that you you did pretty well there, because this certainly was not like I wouldn't say it's a great matchup for you. I don't see that you have a Warhorn in your list. So just going to your list, like his Aura of Dismay. I mean, did you just have like how was your courage rolling against the Aura of Dismay? Because that must have been quite difficult for you.
It was not good. Yeah, it was not good at all. I got lucky though that on from memory, the flank that Bolg was on, because as I'm sure you saw in the diagram, Thranduil, like Azog was killing so many elves a turn. So Thranduil eventually came from behind the army to go in and deal with him. So it put him on the far right side of the board. So the entire left side of the board was fair game. So as Bolg and his entire army didn't have to deal with it for most of the game.
Okay. If I was running this list and I was not going for a Warhorn, I definitely would take some Berserkers, because I would be so worried about charging like a terrifying army. But then on the other hand, your numbers would be hit even harder because Berserkers are 15 points each. So I don't know. I don't know what I would have swapped out in order to put in Berserkers. But I think as the list is, I think it's pretty solid. I just think that if it was me, I would have a few Berserkers or try to get the Warhorn in, and then maybe go down to like 30, maybe 33 or 32 models. But other than that, it's a great list, and with 2 of some of the biggest heroes in the game, that's assassination is a great scenario for you. So for the rating for the list, I'll give it a Hero of Valor.
Thank you.
I'll comment on your list. I don't know if you should thank Charles about the Valor. I think he's underestimating it a little bit. I've always wanted to build it as Azog's Legion list, and I think this is how I would build it. I think there's honestly not much I would change here, because you do have a very set strategy. I realize, especially at 800 points, there's a lot of terror models, but one of my favorite strategies is to go, tin can warriors. Just their role is to not die. Who cares if they're fighting or not? Like, you actually want to be avoiding fights as much as possible sometimes, and you want to be, getting in there with your hero models, which, like you said in that game, Bolg just carved up a whole flank, and he carried you. And if they stop one of your heroes, the other one is just going to consistently do work. So I think it's really, really hard to stop. And I would say it's quite you know, min-maxed in the sense that you pretty much have the most models you could bring without bringing another hero. And if you do bring another hero, you have to drop an ogre, and then you would only have like maybe a couple more guys because the captain is not cheap. So I don't know. There's no real way to kind of get your numbers up efficiently into the 40s. I feel like so. And I mean, ogre is. I know in the monsters episode we touched on him, but he's probably one of the more viable non-hero monsters. 2 warbats, you know, flying is always good. So, yeah, and I've talked to you about your one loss, and I do think that was, you know, a bit unlucky and just the circumstance of that scenario. So, I very much easily think you could have podiumed in even a big tournament like that. I mean, even getting 10th and going 4-1 at a 50+ person tournament shows what you can do. So I got to give it a hero legend.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, the ogre. Sorry, Charles.
No, I was just gonna say. I was just a little bit surprised. I
Why? Because there's no shooting.
because I don't know.
Surprised.
I think armor, heavy armor on Azog is pretty important, and I just thought of this, but Richard brought up like a good point about it hard to go up above 40, but I think you can. You just need to take mercenaries, which is another list, right? It's not like a death ball list. That's more of a mobility list. But I just like, I think if Azog had the heavy armor, I would maybe think
Okay.
about.
I mean, I didn't realize that, but I guess maybe I would have swapped Bolg's felt or the bow, and maybe change up the points a little bit, get him but that's such a minor change. But yeah, I agree with the heavy armor.
I agree. I think to be honest, the only time the heavy armor made any difference, because Azog took wounds in 2 games. In 3 games. 2 of them were against monsters, so they rented him anyways. Didn't matter. The bows, he rolled 1-6 and a 5 to wound him. That was the only damage he took. So, like, I agree. Tactically, it would have made a difference. It made a difference of 1 wound over the whole tournament. So I didn't end the tournament being like, oh, that's one thing I should have changed. But yeah, I agree with that logic. Yeah, I can see where you're going. Richard, of course, knows my original version of this list it didn't have Azog, it actually had Mercs, and I think it was like a 52 model list or something. I went through some revisions, but yeah, I decided having 2 might, like heavy heroes, like one of them with 6 might, was a better investment for the tournament. My kind of defending the courage thing. I agree. The berserkers definitely would have made a huge difference, because if you actually look at my list, both my heroes are courage 5. The ogre, the orcs, and the bats, every single model is courage 3. My first game was against Angmar, and I really noticed I failed almost all my courage tests. Bolg and Azog broke my opponent. My orcs didn't do squat, but Bolg and Azog broke the Angmar list, and the only reason I was able to shut down his big heroes, because both my heroes died by the end of the game, but he was broken, and I had models all over the battlefield. So it was command the battlefield. So he lost. I won that 8-1. The reason, or 8-2, I think. But the reason that I was able to stop his heroes was because of my ogre. Because he, like, first turn of the game, he charged the Witch King on Fell Beast into 2 Gundabad orcs. And then in my move phase, I moved the ogre on top of the 2 Gundabad orcs. And if the ogre finishes his move on top of orcs, they get removed as casualties. So I didn't charge the Witch King. I just killed the 2 guys that he was going to kill anyways. And the Witch King just sat there on his butt for a turn doing nothing. And then the next turn, he did the same thing again. So I think the ogre in that way just stalled. He stalled the Witch King for 5 turns. Twice because I killed my own models, and then it took the Witch King 3 turns to kill him. So I had contingencies, but you are right. The courage, it didn't stop me from winning the game. It just it meant I had to play the game differently.
Is this the same list that we had a practice game?
Yeah.
I still don't like the lack of shields on the back line. That's still, yeah. But I'm so conflicted right now because, like, on the one hand, you get the shenanigans because you have the 2 bats and you have the ogre, which is nice. You still have like reasonable numbers considering the big heroes. I still think I'm a fortitude.
You're getting the whole range today.
Yeah, I like your courage. It's not great, but for evil, courage 3 on everything actually isn't that bad considering they're orcs. It's not
That's fair.
great. It's not good, but it's not like terrible. But
It's the same as on Urukai list.
yeah, and then if you try to swap out, like, I mean, you could get rid of the ogre and get a warhorn and then shields on a whole bunch of guys. I don't know if that's better. If you're expecting a lot more terror, maybe, but then, like you said, the ogre actually made some pretty good plays for you, and he adds in like that 3rd threat to like help your guys. So I don't know.
Yeah, the cool thing about the game, there's so many ways to build a list.
But yeah, like I think if you are gonna build the Azog's Legion with both the big heroes at 800, this is kind of like you go this way or you go the way that Charles said, like with mercenaries is like your only other shenanigans.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I guess the only other thing I can say is I can see we're going with the shields. The shields would have added more to my strategy of just having a line of troops that just stood there, and the whole goal was just to die slowly while my heroes did all the work. I had a game against the Dunlending Legendary Legion. I had 35 models against 52, and it was an objective. It was a breakthrough. So I was like, oh, this game's done. Like, I can't kill 52 models and take more objectives than them. By turn 3, I had killed 23 models. Azog and Bull combined they did 8 models the first turn, they did 8 models the second turn, and then the third turn they did like another 4 or 5. So yeah, they killed almost 20 of the 23 in 3 turns. And then the Warbats just flew and took the objectives last turn, and I won the game. So it was able to do what it needed to do. But yeah, the heroes, I think I learned from your game, because I just so you guys know, I did a practice game against Ian and I lost really badly, like 10-1. And what I did was I charged Ian's heroes. I was like, oh, no problem. Azog can nuke Rumel, Bull can nuke Celeborn. And they ended up just stalling my heroes for like 7 turns, and your army killed the rest of my army. So I learned from that game, and the rest of the tournament, I ignored all the enemy heroes. I just kept feeding them troops, and I didn't charge for like at least the first 5 turns even once a hero that had a striker defense, because I learned from your game that was how I was going to lose.
I will give you props though. I think on like to quote unquote reading the meta for this event, because like I remember you saying the reason you decided on this list is because you played it and you finally beat the Dragon Emperor Legendary Legion.
Yeah.
And I think everybody was kind of worried about that one showing up a whole bunch. I mean, I don't think 2 lists were out there with it, but it was a genuine fear that there's going to be a lot of those and a lot of like Assault on Lothlorien. So that makes sense. And also, not a lot of like big magic casters besides ring wraiths, which is what can shut down your heroes. So you're not as worried about them just being nuked for like most of the game. And I think, yeah, it showed in all your games, right? You just ran through everybody with the 2 heroes. So
I finished 3 games in less than an hour. 1 game in an hour and 15, and the other one in an hour and a half. So it's a glass cannon army. It either kills the opponent really quickly or it dies quickly. But either way, I never timed out.
yeah. Which is that's good though, because I mean I struggle with that. So maybe I should run this list.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone want to go next? Preference?
Yeah, I can go. Just share screen here. Let me know when you guys can see.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So since Alexander is not here today, I guess I will be reviewing his list as well, since we ended up playing each other in Game 4 Lords of Battle. One of the rare times I got to play Alexander. So I'll start with my list. Yes, I did end up playing Assault on Lothlorien. You know, I joined the dark side.
Boo.
But in my defense, this is one of the only times that I've played a thematic list, right, guys?
You
Progress?
always say you're playing thematic lists.
I'll give it to you. This was the first time I haven't seen you run a Yellow Alliance, and I think ever.
Thematic filth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in theory, this is better. Anyways,
Your first two lists was like Last Alliance and then Thranduil's Halls and Iron Hills.
yes. But then that was when I was learning the game. Okay, so my leader is Druzag, leading 1 Bat Swarm, 2 Goblins with Shield, 1 with Spear, 5 with Bow, 4 Prowlers, and 2 Giant Spiders. Asherak leading a very similar warband, 2 Goblins with Shield, 1 with Spear, 5 with Bow, 4 Prowlers, 2 Spiders, 1 Marauder. The Goblin Shaman, 2 with Shield, 1 with Spear, 5 with Bow, 4 Prowlers. Musger with 5 Orcs with Spear, 1 with Shield, Spear, Banner, 1 Bat Swarm, and a Wild Warg Chief with 2 Wargs. Total of 56 models, 29 to break, 8 might, 17 shots, and 12 throwing weapons. I know there's been some discussions in the competitive scene how to run this Legion. Like, we all know it's a really strong Legion right now. I tried multiple variants. One which was without the Wild War Chief mostly, and a lot more spiders and a few more prowlers. So just I guess better troop quality. And I found that it was very, very strong, but it it didn't really fit my playstyle as much as the Wild War Chief version. Plus, it felt like the Wild War Chief version with the hero combats kind of added another element to my strategy. I think talking and practicing with Ian, it felt like without the Wild War Chief, it might be a on paper stronger list with like more well-rounded, with less weaknesses, but um, all your shenanigans are in the move phase. All your casting, a lot of your throwing weapons, um, all your like movement, and by the time combat rolls around, you have no fighters, so people can just hero combat as they want, and the ball's back in their court. And what I like about the Wild War Chief was that there's this one thing, especially if you enrage it, they got something that they got to watch out for. But yeah, again, there were 5 assault lists, so definitely the most popular one at this tournament. We all ran pretty similar. There was a couple different ones. I played a mirror matchup with like the guy went like 11 Marauders. It was a nightmare to play. But anyways, we're talking about this game. So I guess before I go on to Alexander's list, what do you guys have any thoughts about this? I mean, we've all talked about this Legion's death.
I mean, like you said, we had a lot of conversations beforehand, and I don't know, I guess spoilers for the game I'm going to play. I basically played this list twice at the event, and it is like really solid with the White Warg. And I still think there's maybe a shout out for the build with the extra spiders as opposed to the White Warg Chief, but I do agree that is probably the most well-rounded way to run this. With the Chief, because then you still, like you said, you still have some agency in the combat phase with being able to call hero combats and quote unquote the bold enemy heroes. Yeah, so this is probably the best way. And then obviously, I mean, it's kind of hard to run this Legion when it's in like a capable player's hands and not have it be a Hero of Legend list. So definitely got to give it to you because you are super skilled. So
Yeah, you definitely did very well with this list. Yeah, I didn't play you in the tournament, but I had the unfortunate pleasure of playing you with an earlier version of my list that had Prowlers in it. I lost 12-1, so it definitely hit pretty hard, and it was my first time properly, I think, playing against the Assault list. So it had a lot of just like, I didn't see the, the spider run through my list and like just jump right into combat with Bolg or things like that. Like it had so many cool tools. I loved that you included the Wild Warg Chieftain. I know this was something we talked about before because as cool as the spiders were, I really do believe you need something to be able to hit, something to be able to rack up like 4 kills a turn minimum. Because if you don't have that, I don't know. Like I think if you were to face like a 40 or 50 model dwarf list, your troops are going to kill it very slowly. But if you have one thing that can reliably just stomp on a few a turn, it'll help you keep up with them. So the other thing I really liked is I know you had a slightly different hero mix before. I love that you have the shaman. I think kind of one of the criticisms some of you guys had on my list was low courage. The shaman completely neuters that problem, right? So you have Druzag, who's a shaman to your war beasts or your bats and spiders, and then you have a goblin shaman that covers the rest of your army. So I think it was a perfect list. You had the heavy hitters, you had contingencies for your weaknesses. So
Yeah, that was actually a suggestion from you, which I really appreciated because I think I ran the Goblin Captain earlier.
right.
But I guess it came down to the Shaman or the Captain. But I think at 800 with this particular list, the courage is just too important, especially if you break. Like you can't rely on your heroes to stay. Like I know, like Druzag and Ashrak and Musger have will, but you're spending that all game long if you're playing correctly. So they all only have like courage 4 max. Even the Wild War Chief as well, I believe. So none of my heroes you can really rely on sticking around if you end up breaking. So and the thing is with marauders, spiders, bats, I tend to find I have enough movement that the captain and unfortunately the way it plays is a very castle list too. So unless it's a very like objective driven game, I'm really happy to sit back and shoot. So that also eliminates a bunch of marching that I potentially need to do.
Well, the other thing with the shaman is because you get the reroll. Like I always thought it was 1 dice, and I didn't find this out until the event. But you can reroll as many dice as you want to when you cast, which is I think ridiculous. But I'll move past it. It makes the transfix on the regular shaman quite reliable.
Wait. So if you roll 2 dice, you can. Why did I not know this?
Yeah, I swear that's what it says.
Was
thought
I
it was
playing
one
with a
reroll.
handicap?
Well,
Okay.
no, you were playing with an appropriate nerf. Okay, let me hold on. Give me a sec. I'll pull out the book in a minute when somebody else is talking.
I
Just
demand rematches.
Richard's like, I only came third. I could have come second or first.
It's gross, man. It's gross. Like, I mean, no, the list is totally fair and balanced. What am I talking about? Oh, that's great.
Yes,
Ben,
yes, yes. About that third though, I'll say just to wrap it up, I ended up going undefeated in this tournament, but because we used the old system for calculating points, um, it was major VPs were 4 points, and then minor were 3, and then draws 2, and then 1 and 0 for major and minor loss. I had mostly minor wins. I think I only had 1 major win, and then 4 minor wins. So, yeah. So even though I didn't drop a game, I ended up third.
That's unbelievable. Undefeated, not finished, and the guy who finished first did lose a game. So I think the meme that you posted the day after the tournament of a confused looking man trying to figure out how he didn't win a tournament with a 5-0. I agree. I think that was
So Ben, do you have a rating for this list? I think I can guess what it is.
I believe that this is a hero of legend. It the only I can't think of any really good weaknesses to the list. I think you had all your bases covered. So yeah, hero of legend. If you're speaking, Ian, you're on mute.
Good call. It specifically says friendly models may reroll any number of d6 when making a casting roll. Totally fair and balanced. Not awaiting the February FAQ at all.
Richard, you could have won.
Yeah, I can't believe I played with these nerfs. My last game against Mitchell, I should just count that as a major win instead.
So I know that we have listeners from all over the world, and I would say I think the majority of them are not in North America. So like these guys were talking about how this list has been talked about so much the last few months, and there's kind of an evil meta over here in North America, and Assault on Lothlorien, also host of Dragon Emperor, but these two legions have been popping up everywhere, and we haven't done a review episode on this legion, but do let us know if you are still interested in hearing us review and talk about this legion more, because offline, not on this podcast, we definitely have been discussing this legion a lot. It is a very strong local army that I don't think that I wouldn't say that it's like unbeatable, but it definitely takes skill. Otherwise, we would have all of the Assault on Lothlorien legions probably, finish top 10, but I don't think that was the case.
I think you're right.
The skill cap on it is really high to get the most mileage out of it. So I still think it says something that I'm pretty sure Richard hasn't dropped any games playing it, and he's played probably 10 to 15 games with the list now, and not a single loss.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I've seen several of these played. Like I finished my game so early at the tournament that I actually stood and watched several of the games, and yeah, Richard, every game was flawless, and some of the other players that played, they were just they definitely didn't use what they had as well, and so yeah,
still in the hands of a good player. I think this is, if not the best army currently right now, I think it's top 3
for sure.
Richard's earlier list of like getting more spiders instead of the Wild War Chieftain, I actually really like that, because I really like Giant Spider as a warrior. But I also see the benefits of having a mini beat stick in there. Then there's like another role for your Bat Swarms to play as well. Since the Wild War Chieftain can't heroic strike, but Wild War Chieftain is definitely he's a little bit tricky to use because his might doesn't work the same way. You can't really use it unless you take a lot of wild wargs. You can't use it properly. So definitely not an easy hero to control. But if you're bringing him, then and you're going for the podium, most likely you have a strategy, and this obviously worked out for Richard. So it's got to be a hero of legend. I can't see very many armies being able to counter it, at least easily. Like if he brought this to another tournament, I wouldn't be surprised if like a similar finish.
The only scenario that you would struggle in is Contest of Champions. That's it. Every scenario, you do so well with this list.
Yeah, and that's why I think a lot of people put Musger as the leader. But I was even thinking if Druzak gets the +1 to wound, it's not unwinnable at all.
I don't. Contest is still very doable for you because it requires your opponent to not make any mistakes in the first 3 turns, so they can rack up enough kills to make it too hard for you to catch up. If they make any mistakes and you can one-shot them, you have a very reasonable chance of winning.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, on to Alex's list. So he had the Witch King of Angmar, Crown and Horse. For Might Will Fate, he has 3-14-2, and that's his leader. And in his first warband, he is leading 4 Orc Warriors with Shield, 2 Moranins with Shield, 3 Orcs with Spear, 1 with Moranin with Shield, Spear, Banner, and then 1 Moranin with Shield and Spear, 2 Ward Riders with Shield. Garitz leading 3 Orcs with Shield, 2 Moranins with Shield, 3 Orcs with Spear, 2 Moranins with Shield, Spear, and 1 Ward Rider with Shield. Gorbag, 3 Orcs with Shield, 2 Moranins with Shield, 3 Orcs with Spear, 2 Moranins with Shield and Spear. Oh, I feel like I'm just repeating myself, deja vu. But the next warband, Zagdouche, 2 Orcs with Shield, 2 Moranins with Shield, 3 with Orcs with Spear, 1 Moranin Orc with Shield and Spear, 1 Ward Rider with Shield. And then the last warband, we have Kardouche the Firecaller, 3 Orcs with Shield, 3 Orcs with Spear, and 6 Orc Trackers. 60 models. I didn't expect him to be outnumbered at all, but he has, I think he had one of the highest at the tournament. Basically, Witch King, all like the mid-tier Orc captains, and just Orcs. I mean, he has a decent amount of cav, but yeah, just Orc Warriors and Moranin Orcs. I'll say I played him at the tournament as well as in a practice game. I think it's just very, very well-rounded. I think not a lot of weak matchups. I think he's able to compete against most lists and most scenarios. I think perhaps Lords of Battle, might be one of his weaker ones due to the Horde, but again, he has the tools. Not much to say. We've all seen the Mortar or Horde before. I think it's really solid. So I would give this a Hero of Valor.
Yep, same. We've seen similar lists from Alex. He likes to try to cover every weakness and have as balanced of a list as possible. It has his signature favorite heroes, Guritz, Gorbag, Kardouche, they're all there. And the model count is the strongest part of the list. I agree with the Hero of Valor.
Yeah, it's solid. 60 models is good, as we talked about. Like the general meta is there's a lot of objective based scenarios, so having a lot of models is good. And like everybody said, he covers all of his bases. It is kind of nice that he has like Gorbag and Zagdouche are actually kind of like they can be sneaky good at killing troops because they can both be 3 attacks at like a reasonable fight value and strength to just munch through troops. Or strike up if you need to. If the Witch King can immobilize like a big enemy target, they can both strike. And obviously Kardouche and like the Witch King is just good for picking off VPs or picking off banners because of their the fireball in combination with Black Dart or Compel. I don't know if maybe a soft legend or like a high valor. I'm kind of stuck between the two. Because there is no like big wow factor here, but there also like there's nothing that's like a letdown. So I don't know. He's also making really good use of his army bonus too, right? So his orcs are going to be at a reasonable courage value because they get +1 courage. They're basically going to outnumber everybody, and he's going to be rerolling lots of 1s everywhere. So it's a nice little boost in damage. So solid.
Yeah. I don't think I like it as much as you guys, but yeah, I definitely think it's either a high fortitude or low valor. I think it just comes down to a difference in play style, though. He actually did quite well in the tournament. Do you guys know where he finished? Was it like 7th or something with the list?
9th, I believe.
Ninth?
One
Okay.
of his best finishes, yeah.
Yeah, one above me. Yeah, so I can't criticize it too hard. He's better than me, but I have played against this list before, and it was at a previous tournament because he brought pretty much the same list to the 800-point tournament that you ran, Charles, back in July. And yeah, it's like it did well. it just doesn't have any like hitting power. Like it just relies on slowly grinding down the opponent. And I just found that in that tournament, I ran a Troll Brute and Azog, and my Troll Brute and Azog got like 27 kills between the two of them or something in the game. And so I broke him. And then the game ended because we ran out of time. So I think it's the biggest struggle I have with these kinds of lists is that they slow the game down, and then quite often you time out before the game finishes. But yeah, so I think you're right. I think the list works really well. It's got enough Moran and Orcs that it's hard to kill quickly. It struggles killing. That'd be the only thing knocking it down a tier for me, is that it just takes a while for it to grind away at like a dwarf or a Minas Tirith backline. So, but yeah, clearly Alex did really well with it. He knows how to use it. So.
Yeah, so going into our game, so this is the second last game, so we were both quite high up. I think this was the top 4th table. So we were both in the top 10. And what was interesting was, in my opinion, a big part of it was coming down to the roll off for deployment, and he won the roll, and he decided to take this side. And I believe this is because in our practice game, it was quite the open field, and I shot him down with my assault list. But I'm not sure if this worked better for him, giving me a fortified side. So he set up along, the halfway point. And as you can see, for the listeners who are just listening as well, we have like a farmland, which is quite open on one side, and then the other side, which I was placed in, there's kind of a patch of forest here with some houses and a little like farm that you could run through, but there's like a gate funnel, so only maybe 2 or 3 models deep could go in at the same time. And the way I set up was behind these barriers with prowlers, so I could have throwing weapons as he came in and still fight over a barrier. I had some bowmen here, being able to have some open shots as he came through the lane if he wanted to come this way. And then also I guarded the open side if he decided to run at me through the more clear field, so I would get some shots there. He actually, I think, did the right thing by calling a heroic march early on and actually going down this open lane. And as ugly as it is, trying to fit 60 models down this like narrow gateway, I think it was better than going through like this farmland, like I say, passageway that's like 2-3 models deep, and I think I would have crushed them in this field. But one of the proudest moves that I believe I've talked about right after this game was once he had his whole army deployed here, right in front of my essentially fortress. I casted Shroud of Shadows on a giant spider who was blocking this between the farm and the brush. So there's only one cavalry model base wide. So the spider was taking up this spot, and I had a bunch of prowlers, like 6 or 7 prowlers right behind, throwing weapons into his front line every single turn. And he wasn't able to charge in to my spider, I believe, for 3 turns. It was, I took advantage of the shooting, and he also, of course, tried to come down here. I kind of kited him a little bit, and then I moved back a little bit farther into the fortress. and then there was a little bit of a fight here, but unfortunately, it just took quite a while, and so the turns were winding down. I had some of my beasts with the Wild War Chief circle around his army from the back. So at the time, I believe I had killed about 20, 25 models. I didn't believe I was going to break him. And he had only killed, I believe, 3 models. So I was in a 7-0 lead. He was doing a good job protecting his Witch King. So, but I was thinking about VPs. I did get a little greedy. I was thinking maybe if I rushed in the last turn, maybe I could break him. Maybe I could kill the Witch King to get a bit higher. But what he played really well. So as I came out of this tunnel to charge in, and I charged in from his flank, he did he like we said earlier, he has a lot of these mid-range orc captains, and he just chain heroic combated off, and that's something that I guess I didn't expect he would be so aggressive with. I knew he wouldn't break me because he's not going to kill 30 models in one turn, but he ended up winning a lot of combats, and he got to a point where I think he killed over 10 goblins. So I ended up not tripling his wounds and only doubling his wounds. But yeah, I guess the reason why I chose this game not only is it because I got to play Alex, but I think it shows a lot in using the terrain to your advantage. And even though I understand Lords of Battle is probably a little bit favored for me, I believe even in a matchup that might not be, if you can know the strength of your list and play accordingly, like this, unfortunately, like it felt like from the beginning, once he had given me this deployment position, I did not think I was going to lose unless something really, really crazy happened. So I think some games, if you set yourself up right, you're just, in the driver's seat to win the game.
Yeah, Alex and I talked about this a little bit afterwards, and I think his deployment was like he was thinking it's better for him to, like you said, to run at you, like take the open field. So he starts in the open, yes, but he's running at you where there's a lot of terrain on your board, and you're obviously going to try and sit back, so there's more stuff he can hide behind in the way. It's not a bad idea, but maybe better if he had like a smaller number army. If he had more elite army that's like 35 to 40 models, that might have been the better choice. In this case, because he has the 60 models and he outnumbers you, maybe deploying the other way was the better idea, just so he can get as much frontage into combat with you as possible, because he does outfight you in most of the line, right? Because most of your lines fight 2 and most of his is fight 3.
And just to add in, Max, the TO, got a picture in the middle of the match, so you can kind of see how things were a little bit deployed here, with his army grouped all 60 models here. Where
the guy on the right looks so much happier than the guy on the left.
I was trying to keep it in, not to be rude.
Trying to keep in the giddiness.
But yes, this was halfway through the game what the game kind of looked like in live action.
Also, it just occurred to me that you just like plowed through half the podcast at this tournament.
Yes, I did play quite a few podcast members.
Oh well.
Thank God I dodged the Laktins and Charles as well.
You got to play us in practice games, and you still beat us. So you technically plowed through the entire podcast, other than maybe Charles. This game sounds phenomenal. I mean, your strategy sounds like it was perfect. The matchup, I think, yeah, like it sounds like Alex, took advantage of probably one of the strengths of his list. He had lots of might and enough mid-tier heroes that he was able to fill like a front line, with 4 or 5, beat stick or 3 might, 2 attack type heroes to fight. But yeah, horde armies don't like choke points, so you definitely took advantage of one of the weaknesses. So awesome. That was a fantastic game, it sounds like.
I think that you were favored because of your shooting, but if he was able to close in and you had a few bad rounds of shooting, I don't think his odds of winning was that terrible, because his heroes in general, like on average, are probably better in combat than yours, and his models are a lot harder to kill, right? So earlier when we were reviewing his list, we were saying that he was missing some kind of wow factor in his list. I think Black Numenorians are cheap enough and cost efficient enough that if you were to swap some Mirandans for Black Numenorians and he had Fight 4, that would give him a huge advantage against your goblins, your orcs, and even your spiders. It would tie spiders, and I think that would be pretty scary for you. Especially when he doesn't really have models that synergize with the orc keyword that well. Like he doesn't have like Gothmog, for example. So I don't think it was necessary to go all orcs, but yeah, that like great job taking advantage of the terrain, because if it was open field, then I think Alex would have a pretty good shot at surrounding you.
Yeah,
That's a good point. Yeah. Sorry, Rich.
Oh, I was just saying, and I think what Alex was calling the invisible wall. I think the reference he was making was, how like in a video game, you try to like walk off the edge of a map, but you can't because it's like blocked. He was saying his orcs can get through.
Yeah. No, you said you utilize the terrain. I think this is a good example where, Charles is right. You might not have been entirely favored, like it wasn't a guaranteed win list-wise. You just played the terrain to your advantage and won. So.
And yeah, like props for using the like invisible ring rules shenanigans to the absolute most, considering you have a shooting list. I've never heard of anybody doing that, and it's hilarious, and it's so mean considering your list.
I never would have considered that.
Yeah,
so smart.
No chance. Because yeah, he has nothing for that, because his fury doesn't help with the ring. It's a perception test.
Yeah, and people were saying like, oh, why didn't he just walk through the spider? But then I had prowlers in the back, so you can't land on the actual spider. So.
Oh, they were like right up against. Okay, yeah.
Oh yeah, because they were throwing over.
Yeah,
like a barrier, right?
Like 2 ranks. Yeah, because he doesn't count. He doesn't count as in the way for anything. Yeah, hilarious.
All right, Ian, do you want to go over your list?
Sure, I'll go over mine. Considering
you're the only good side, so it's good to have you in the middle.
We'll mix it up, and considering how much I just hyped up Assault on Lothlorien, this is the 1 time out of 4 games that I've beaten it. Oh, spoilers! Oops. Shouldn't have said that. Give me 1 sec. I'll share my screen. So actually, a bit of, I don't know, for long-time listeners of the podcast, they may remember way back in episode 1, I wrote a list involving a bunch of Iron Guard, because I've had about 8 Iron Guard sitting around for a long time, and I've wanted to run a list with mass Iron Guard. And this is finally the chance that I've gotten to do it. So my list, let me just pop it up right here. That's, maybe I'll do that. There we go. So here's my list. Okay, I'll start from the top. I have Celeborn, and he's fully equipped. In his warband, he has 1 Wood Elf Warrior with Spear, 1 Galadrim Warrior with Spear, Shield, and a Banner, 2 Guards of Galadrim Court, 1 Galadrim Knight with Shield and a Bow, and 1 Sentinel. My next warband is Rumil. He has 2 Guards of the Galadrim Court and 1 Sentinel. Next one is the Dwarf King, just no extra gear, just by himself, and he has 6 Iron Guard and 4 Dwarf Warriors with Bow. My last warband is Arvidui, 10 Warriors of Arnor, and 5 Rangers. So, as I was saying, the basic thesis of this list was I wanted to run a bunch of Iron Guard. And to balance that out, I kind of just went through stages of what to ally. So Arvidui and Arnor is a yellow alliance with these dwarves. So getting in cheap spears that are they're only 8 points, and like a lot of them was good for me to balance out the expensive cost of the Iron Guard. So I kind of wanted to go that route. So grabbed him, and then my next choice was I was kind of thinking of grabbing a Blinding Light to protect the Iron Guard, but wasn't sure if I 100% needed that because I could put the Warriors of Arnor in front, and they're cheap and they can take the shots because I don't really care if they die as much. So, I was debating that, and the initial one I wrote had Celeborn and Galadriel allied in, and I was like, well, I don't need Galadriel. I ally her into everything. I want to run Rumil. I haven't run him in a while. Okay, we'll throw Rumil in, and I kind of just ended up with this combination. And it kind of worked pretty well because, yeah, I know we didn't say we loved Celeborn, but he actually kind of brings something to the list with his magic because, about a third of my list is Arnor, which is Courage 2. He has a fantastic Courage bubble. So with Aura of Command to basically negate that. So that's kind of where that came in. And also just, a solid leader. He's a Lord of the West. He just needs to get in there. And, if he's fighting 2 guys a turn, he's happy. He has strike. He has defense. If a hero goes into him, he can either fight them or just hold them off for long enough until other stuff happens. So he was pretty solid. Rumil, I used to run a lot last edition. I probably haven't run him in about 4 years. He is still fantastic. Having heroic defense on him and just base defense 7 is great. And the rest of the list is kind of self-explanatory. I, of course, maxed bows simply because I wanted options. In case I came up against a list that didn't have a lot of shooting, then I could shoot. As it turns out, at the event, I basically was forced to run it into my opponent in 3 of my games, so my shooting didn't actually do that much because I was outshot in those ones, but it was nice to have the option. What else is interesting? Oh, and the 2 Sentinels. Yeah, that was just for shenanigans. Shenanigans is nice in this list because I don't have a lot of I don't have any mounted heroes. So in order to it kind of functions as a way to pseudo increase my movement, because if I can pull out an enemy warrior or something, charge him with some of my heroes and hurl combat off of that, I can gain extra movement from that. And I tried to do that in a few of my games. It didn't quite work out the way I wanted to when I needed it to, but that was kind of the thinking. Yeah. Comments, criticisms.
I have played against this list, and although Azog killed 4 Iron Guards in the first turn, everything else was terrifying. I think Celeborn, I know he's an underrated hero, but even though you can't mount him, he's got all the right stats. He's got the rerolls, he's got the D7, he's got the fight 6 with the strike, and then you're right, the magic. I didn't even think about the Courage, the Aura of Command, being basically a makeshift shaman. You had 4 heroes that could all fight, and your entire army was pretty much fight 4 and fight 5. Yeah, the one game I played against it, it was so reliable. Every model was able to do something. Every model could contribute to all aspects of the game. So yeah, I don't know. I thought it was a hero of valor for sure, like a solid hero of valor. I did not want to play it again after playing it the first time.
This reminds me of back when in our earlier episodes, where we just tried out different mishmash different lists together, and just to see if there would be any synergy. And yeah, if I was playing this list, I wouldn't know what to do with it, because it looks kind of random to me, but I kind of understand what you're going for. Your heroes are all they're all able to fight pretty well. And I guess I can see the synergy between the Arnor and the Aura of Command. That's pretty good. It's probably going to be Celeborn or Galadriel, right? As from Lothlorien. So, yeah, I don't know, because I didn't play Yuyi in practice or at the tournament, so I don't know how I would feel when I actually play it. But it seems pretty solid, and you did pretty well. So I don't know how I would improve it, because it just I guess you could take less Lothlorien and more dwarves, or maybe more Arnor, and take advantage of the undercosted warrior there. But you're probably basing the list around your hero choices. So I don't know if you would have wanted to go that route and just focus on 2 alliances rather than 3. But yeah, I think I would agree with the Valor rating as well.
It was just so awkward to fight. Most armies, when you ally something, you're bringing something else, right? Like you're bringing in goblins for horde, or you want better shooting, so you bring like elves but this didn't. Like every section of your 3 sections I chose to fight, they all had high defense, they all had high fight value, they all had a 3 attack beat stick hero. Like it was like, all right, I'm just going forward and hitting it all at the same time and see what happens. So yeah.
Yeah, so I played against this a couple times. I think it's interesting, but what I think stops me from giving this like a legend is, I think, in particular, because I played you with Assault on Lothlorien, that you had to come to me. I think this list is very, very strong if you win the shoot war and you have that priority. But I think the issue is quite apparent when you have to come running to the opponent. You do have the heroic march, but I find that that's one of the biggest issues with the foot heroes. When they're running up to you, a little similar to like Alex's list with his mortar or captains. Obviously, your heroes are stronger, but they're just a lot less threatening. Having to move up that like 6, and then like also put them in a prime position to like threaten you, because you can readjust your line accordingly. I just don't love that, especially if you can have like a mounted like Lord of the West. If you're coming up and the battle lines are 6 inches apart, that Glorfindel or like Gil-galad can literally go into anywhere in your line, and it's a lot more threatening. So I think obviously like you're a very, very skilled player. So I think that's why it's very strong in your hands. But as a list, there's some things I don't love about it. I know you wanted to play with the Iron Guard, but I also think they're slightly overcosted. So even if you're going to bring a few, 6 is not my ideal. You could spam out a lot more of the regular dwarves. I do like the 2 sentinels for shenanigans, but yeah, I think going all foot heroes, especially when you're playing good, not really my style. But I would give it like maybe like a low level Valor.
Oh, lads, I will take all Valors for this. Yeah, I mean, I had conversations with a few people about this list, and they're all like, huh, that's weird. It seems kind of filthy. I'm like, I don't think it's filthy. It's certainly optimized. I'm not really sure what it is, but it definitely is.
It's a head scratcher.
It is. It definitely confuses a lot of people.
I was definitely not sure how I felt. I was like, is it fit? No, maybe, I don't know.
And like we're saying, like, so it does have the shooting. It's not a shooting list. Like it's one of those lists where it's like, oh, you don't have any bows, and I can sit here and shoot on you, and like it's not going to cost me objectives. perfect. I'll down, half a dozen models, and then we'll get into combat. It has that ability. That's not really what it does well. And unfortunately, it took me till about like halfway through the tournament to kind of like really figure this out. But if this list gets 2 to 3 rounds of combat against an enemy list, with the majority of the Iron Guard and the heroes fighting troops, like it doesn't just have to be fighting troops. Like obviously sometimes I have to put a couple of the heroes to stop heroes. But if I get the Iron Guard and say 2 of the heroes fighting troops, maybe 1 heroic combat or 2, I'll kill like 20 models in 2 turns. Like it just goes through enemy troops, provided they're D6 or less. I didn't have the joy of playing a dwarf horde with this list, and I was afraid of that. But like D6 or less, this list just chops through. And unfortunately for me, just because of the lists that I was playing against in this, I was outshot in about 3 of the games I had to play. So I had to run to them, and they kind of had to could sit back at the back of the board. So we just ran out of time. So I didn't end up getting those 3 rounds of combat to force the breakthrough. But if you do get those conditions, it can be pretty gross.
All right, tell us about your game.
So in this game, this was game 4. So we were playing, what were we playing? Playing Clash by Moonlight. Wait, what were we playing?
Lords of Battle.
Lords of Battle. That's the one, not Clash by Moonlight. My brain is melting because of the stupid rules for Assault on Lothlorien.
You just muted yourself.
Yeah, sorry. My brain's melting a little bit because it's always midnight here in Assault on Lothlorien town. So the guy I was playing against was Brian. He had the same list as Richard, basically, almost exactly the same. Like there's a few nuances. I think maybe he had a couple more bows than you, but it was basically the same list as Richard. So if you want comparison, you can go back and rewind and look at his list. It's basically the same thing. And we were playing on this Hobbit board right here. So a couple small alterations, though, to the board. So this picture was taken, I think, at the start of the event before any games were played. So by the time round 4 happened, can you guys see my cursor?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So by the time we were playing our game, this tree here, this little group of trees was it was a couple inches further, maybe like around here. Let's see. It was a couple inches, maybe like here or so. And this other one that's further down was kind of further back, kind of like back here. So that makes a little bit of a difference for how the game played out. But anyway, so I deployed my list here. Basically, everyone is kind of clumped up between the bridge and the house here, and trying to avoid the stream because we were playing out of shallow water. And obviously, I have a lot of dwarves and I'm all infantry. Not so good for me to be running in there. So I had to set up everybody there. And he set up his line kind of along the back edge here, and then slightly curving up the side here. And basically, I think the first 2 turns, I think I called 2 marchers with my Dwarf King. And basically, I ran my whole list up through this gap. He had maybe a half to third of his bows were sitting down in this corner, down here. So I was kind of trying to use this one tree as much as possible just to block shots on my heroes and my Iron Guard. They were kind of insulated. I basically made a little death ball with Warriors of Arnor in the front, and then like 2 ranks of Warriors of Arnor, and then my Iron Guard clumped in the middle, and then kind of like my bowmen and rangers kind of out the sides. So my guys mostly ran up there. I left a few archers out between the trees here and the building, just kind of trade shots. Some of my dwarf bows, some of the rangers, they're kind of hiding behind the trees there too. I think a sentinel was in there. Trading shots, getting a few kills. And in the initial few turns, the shooting war wasn't too bad. I think maybe I lost 6 guys, but I managed to kill like 3 or 4. So like the trade-off was actually, I can't really complain about that. That was pretty good. And then when I got about 1.5 turns away from his line, I managed to pull out 1 prowler, I think, and I jumped on a whole bunch like Rumil, or I jumped on 2 of my heroes. I think it was Arvidui and the Dwarf King and a bunch of Iron Guard onto him, but they were kind of exposed out in the front of my land. I couldn't get enough coverage on them. I got them covered from maybe half the bows. And in that one round of shooting, he picks up like 1 die for a Goblin Archer way back here who just somehow has a perfect line of sight to the combat with no other in the ways, and he killed the Goblin. I was so mad. I was so mad. I was like, I set this up so well. There should have been in the ways on almost everybody except like there's like maybe a group of 3 or 4 goblins there, and the first one he tries kills the goblin. It's so annoying. But anyway, c'est la vie. So I didn't get into combat a turn early, unfortunately. After that, yeah, combat was joined kind of basically where this arrow is formed here, so kind of along this line. There. So that's where I got most of my heroes, my Iron Guard, into fighting. And then I kind of had, I guess, a refused flank. So I kind of had some guys curling off up to here. And the reason I did that is because, I should have mentioned this earlier, there's a little circle down here in the bottom right with a little W in it. That was where his white War Chieftain was. And he spent most of the turns I was advancing just kind of sitting there. So by the time combat happened, he was like 2 turns away from being able to do anything. So first round of combat went pretty well, got some real combats off, did some damage down here. The White Warrior goes, oh crap, I need to go do stuff. I can need to like try and stop his heroes. So I make this full screen. There we go.
Oh yeah, never mind.
The White Warrior, so he started coming around here like this. These other circles behind, I should say, are his like bats and spiders, and then the 2 that are over here are just regular wild wargs. So they just kind of like, they started joining the fight kind of on my flank here, and in here a little bit, but they were a little bit nervous because my heroes were there, and I think I managed, over the first 2 turns, I managed to kill a couple of them. And I guess now in the second round of combat, so let's say the White Warg is basically where the end of his arrow is. We're going into the next turn. I managed to sentinel an orc to stand right here and charge his whole front line along here. So his White Warg Chieftain was just kind of sitting there with nowhere to charge in the front. So instead of kind of going into the fight, he ended up having to loop around to try and go this way to chase down some rangers there, just to get into the fight to do stuff. So I successfully blocked out his White Warg Chieftain basically for most of the game until like what ended up being the last round of combat. And that was it, right? But that was basically the game. It was me running here. We had the 1 round of combat. Second round of combat, the White Warg has to run around. We're still fighting in this general kind of L shape here. And by this point, I had like the kill count was more or less even. I think I had pulled ahead by a bit, but I was getting really close to my break point. So going into the last turn, the White Warg Chieftain's up here. He's poised to run around my flank and do some damage, get enough kills. I think I was 3 off breaking. He was like 10 off breaking, but I was ahead on the kill count. So in the last turn, basically thinking, okay, we're going to draw. I'm going to be ahead on kills, so I'll get 3 points. My leader's probably fine. I'm not going to get to his leader, so there's nothing there. I'm not going to break him, probably, because I needed, I did the math after all the fights were paired off. I think I needed to kill in, like, every single fight, and then I would have broken him. So that wasn't going to happen. And then his White Warg Chieftain up here was basically, he jumped onto a single ranger. He got enraged, and he had 2 other wargs there. And he was poised to go to kill him off of heroic combat and jump into like a couple of the random guys I had sitting around the back just to flank. But that would have been 3 kills, enough to break me. So, okay, last round, he's probably going to get the break. I have to try and get the break on him too and get as many kills as possible, and then maybe I can peep out a win. And all things considered, because it's Lords of Battle, I would like to think that it is... Like I managed to play it skillfully enough to get to this point where like I still had a chance of winning. I had a bout of ridiculous luck at the end here that kind of cinched it for me. So this White Warg Chieftain up here setting up that heroic combat, he's enraged, so he's got like 8 dice against my Lonely Ranger. I was like, you know what? Go Ranger, go. Throw the 1 dice while he was still like counting out all of his dice, and the Ranger rolls a 6, and I was like, yeah! He tried. Good job, Ranger. You nailed it. I'm proud of you. Good effort. And then Brian rolled his dice. And he got a 4 high on his white warg, or on the wild warg, and then like 1s and 2s on his regular troops. And we're both just kind of like stopped and we're like looking at it. And he was like, huh. And I was just like, huh. And I think we shook hands at that point because it was like, that is terrible luck for you, my dude, and incredible luck on my part. And yeah, it was like, it was a little, it was stupid. But, you know, like we say, sometimes in events, it does take a certain amount of luck for you to pull things out. So that happened. That was great. So now I'm thinking, oh crap, maybe we're not going to draw. Because like there's a reasonable chance for my guys to like live. I'm not like a reasonable chance I'm not going to take 3 casualties, and I think I might be able to break him. And maybe I probably should have shielded on a bit more of the fights here than I did, but I just kind of I got a little greedy and I tried to go for kills. So we resolved the rest of the fights around here, and I managed to get him to 1 off breaking, and he managed to kill 2 of my guys. So I was 1 off breaking, he was 1 to 2 off of breaking, and I had 30, I think, points, and he had like 15. So I was, or like 16. So I was almost doubling him. And then it came down to the end. We're like, oh man, I've almost doubled you. That's crazy. No break. And we're like, does the hit from the white warg chief there on the wild warg, does that counts for a point, right? So he did the wound, and that's what it was. Yeah, he did the wound, but he ended up being 31 wounds done to his force to like 16 to me. So I didn't double him, but he didn't break me. Neither of us broken. Nothing else happened. So I think I got it 3-1 or 3-0, something like that. But yeah, it was crazy. I'm just happy I managed to beat this list. But yeah, like purely luck based on that last round. Otherwise, it would have been a draw. Had the game gone on longer and we didn't time out, I don't know. It would have been interesting. Hopefully, I think I still could have had a chance against him because I probably would have broken him the next turn. And I don't know how well that list handles being broken. But yeah, it was a solid game. Brian played pretty well, but he just kind of like, I don't know, like I think the only mistake he made was maybe not moving up his white war chieftain a turn earlier because he just got boxed out, and then just like a little bit of poor luck. Like I managed to pull the sentinel in to block him at a really opportune time. I won the heroic move so I could do that, and then obviously the warg failing his heroic combat was huge.
Wow. I'm impressed you beat a assault Lothlorien in a game where you had to get shot at and then fight them in close combat. So great job.
So no comments on the game from me, but you did say white warg chieftain quite a few times.
I know.
No, you did not have Azog.
Big scary warg, is that better?
So I think that I wasn't there to watch the game, but I think the game would have gone differently if Brian had deployed on the other side of that stream, because he already knew that you were going to have to come to him. So if he deployed on the left side of the board on that hill, you would have had to swim or go backwards on that bridge and loop around, which would give him 2 or 3 turns of shooting. Right? Because
true.
I'm just trying to think in Brian's shoes why I would deploy on the same side as you when there's a river that divides the board and down the middle.
I think maybe he just didn't consider going like that, like this side and that side.
No. Like,
or you mean just
the
like
same
up
side
here
of the board, but
here.
on the left side. Yeah, on that hill.
I think he won the roll off to choose which side, and he put down a warband over here where he initially deployed, and then I put down Rumel kind of like in the middle, and Rumel's warband is like 4 guys, so like it's okay if they're out of position a little bit. And after that, he put down another warband over here, so it's like, okay, his army is going like on this side. He's not gonna like, he doesn't want to risk his goblins move super slow, so I don't think he wanted to split his army either.
Yeah,
But
true.
that is a good point.
I understand that. I just yeah, like as an observer, I might experience it differently because when you're actually playing the game, sometimes you don't catch everything. So, but like while we're alternating deploying warbands, I might have considered maybe deploying on the other side just so that it kind of messes your deployment a little bit potentially. But if you're saying that you're the one that deploy first, then or yeah, you deploy first, right?
I think he picked side and then put down a warband.
Okay,
first
he deployed
on this
first.
side.
Yeah, so it's harder that way.
And then I put Rumel kind of down in the center, and then he put a second one down. So he had like 20 models down, and I had 4.
Okay.
So it was kind of obvious. And then the other thing too is maybe this line was a little bit further back because the stream here was in my deployment zone. Like I had, I managed to like fudge it enough. Like I had some more guys up on the bridge, but the stream back here did complicate my deployment and slow down some of my guys like a reasonable amount.
Okay. Yeah.
That's why you drop the Wild War Chief first, and usually alone.
Yeah, I think his warbands were pretty evenly split. Like they were all kind of like 7 to 10 models, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, like Richard said, right? If he dropped the warband, the Wild Warg first, and if he had a single drop, then deploy the rest of his army on the left, then it would be significantly harder for you to get to him, and yeah, and then you probably would have thought, oh, I should have taken Gladriel instead of Celeborn.
Oh, frick, man! This was my second round against Assault on Lothlorien, and the round after this, I played a Harad list with like 24 bows. So yeah, I was really wishing I had Blinding Light for like most of the tournament.
Oh, good job though, considering that I'm not sure if you were favored in that matchup. You did well though.
Well, I think that kind of harkens back to like the when you're saying what it takes to win an event and whatever episode that was, like I like to think it was some amount of skill that got me into the position where like we could tie, and then like I said earlier, like just blind luck that it like that heroic combat failed and I ended up getting the win. But yeah, it's definitely a rough matchup. But this was like the one game where I kind of did get what I wanted to. Like I got my heroes in and most of my Iron Guard in for 3 rounds of combat, and I did about 30 wounds.
Wow.
Yeah. So
good job. It sounds like you made the best of a bad matchup. So
yeah.
All right, so I'll be covering the 4th game of this episode, and not trying to make it uninteresting, but I also picked game 4. My game went a little bit different than you guys, though. I picked a game that I lost in. So let me share my screen.
Charles proving he's more humble than the rest of us. Richard didn't have a choice. He was just undefeated. Ian and I were like, I'm not going to share how that bad game went.
I'm just happy I won that freaking game, man.
Yeah.
Assault on Lothlorien lost. That's all I wanted.
Ben, don't stroke my ego even more. I can't get any more cocky.
Sure, you could have tried.
The only thing left now is the perfect score, right? 5 12-0s.
Yeah, you get, dude, next GT, Richard, 20 points. 20 tournament points.
That would be disgusting.
Yeah, no, that would be it.
You guys see?
Yeah,
we can see.
Okay, so game 4 was I was out on top table against Mitchell Hammond, and the night before we found out about our matchups that I was going to play him on top table the next day, and I was still able to get some sleep, but I don't like playing against the Dragon Emperor. He brought the whole host of Dragon Emperor. This was the table, and so let me just.
So was this your second Hammond of the tournament or third?
This was my third Hammond. So I played
Oh my goodness.
previous day. I played Marcus and Matthew, and I was like, okay, well, there's just one more Hammond, and then I got matched up against Mitchell. So that was.
Hey, if you
Complete the full set.
yeah, if you beat him, then you would show that Into the West is superior podcast to the Duran show.
If this
I mean-
episode comes out before any of the stuff they do in the next couple months, then we win. Is that how that works?
I mean, I guess I did beat Mitchell in the final round, so I redeemed us a little bit.
Let's just not say who won the event. Just don't bring that up.
Yeah.
He had a loss.
Yeah, you're not bitter about that at all here, Richard.
So okay, so go over my list first. So so I did Farharad and Serpent Horde Alliance. I had so from Farharad, Mahud King with Camel, Shield, and War Spear, 5 half trolls, 1 Mahud Warrior with Spear, 1 Mahud Warrior with Spear and Blowpipe, and 3 Mahud Raiders with War Spear and Blowpipe. Second warband led by Mahud King, identical to the first, and then a final warband of Suladan on Armored Horse, 8 Haradrim Warriors with Spear, 2 Haradrim Warriors with Bow, and 7 Haradrim Warriors with Bow and Spear. So that's 40 models. That's 9 bows, and then 8 blowpipes. So this is similar to a list that I brought to Adepticon 3 years ago. I modified it a little bit to bring up the numbers. You know, I dropped 2 camels and then basically bulked up Suludan's warband. But essentially, it plays the same. If fans of the podcast have listened to older episodes where I've gone over that list, it heavily relies on the Mahud Kings and the half trolls to do the heavy lifting to fight most of the combats, get most of the kills. Suludan is a support hero, and also he has the heroic march if I need it. And I just went for tons of spears, just because previously I played with more Mahud infantry with spear, and those were just more expensive. So I went for the slightly softer but greater in number warriors of Harad with spear. So 40 models is, I would say, smack down in the middle for average model count for 800 points, but it is surprisingly tough when you have 10 half trolls that are multi-wound. Any thoughts on this list before I go into the game?
It's terrifying. I talked to my brother after the game you played against him, and it hits like a freight train. It's a little glass cannony, but I'm a big fan of glass cannon armies because you either beat your opponent quickly or you lose quickly. So, yeah, love it.
I think for the most part, if you haven't played against this list before, you don't realize what it can do, and then it just walks through you. It's gross. Like I don't remember like how when you first started bringing this. I think it probably took me like 5 or 6 games to actually figure out how to fight it, because there's just so many threats, and the camels are so annoying.
Okay, so I'm playing against, like I said earlier, a host of the Dragon Emperor Legendary Legion. So Mitchell's army was, I think, around the same as mine, 40 or maybe slightly more. But he deployed around here, and I deployed around here. So he might have been up on the line actually, but basically he decided to all deploy on this choke. So I knew that he had the cataphractic drum and that he was going to come at me, and I had to decide where the combats were going to meet and where I wanted to fight. So ideally I wanted to split combats between this choke and this choke, because you know, if he were to come down here and fight here, then it would be almost open for me. So I put maybe 10 models here, and then the rest of them, I moved them up slightly here as he marched forward. I didn't realize how much he would be committed into moving here, because he didn't move any models there. He just sounded the war drums and came down here. I had maybe 2 turns of shooting. I killed maybe 2 or 3 acolytes, and that was about it. And he parked his Easterling Emperor here, Dragon Emperor here, and then his pikemen just went along this line, and then I put my half trolls here. So it was half troll with a Haradrim spear against a black dragon with 2 supports, and we were both fight 5. So every single combat basically came down to a roll off, and I kept half trolls here because his whole army kind of sat here, and I was hoping that he would send them around. I didn't use them to come and support my main battle line because there wasn't any space to fight. So one of the things I wasn't sure what to do was with the reserve I had here. So I had another picture that I took during the game that might help illustrate it. So basically he marched down here, and right before the lines clashed, this is where the warbands are looking. And I wasn't fully committed to walking around because I knew that with his drum, he would be able to outrun me and just move his whole army down here. And then my half trolls would have to spend at least 3 more turns to walk around to do anything. And so they decided to stay here. They couldn't come here because next turn, there were already 2 full lines of combats here. So these models struggle to do very much for 3 or 4 turns, which was I was not very happy with. So when the lines clashed, finally, it looked like this. And you know, we both sides provided a banner, and it was 3 dice against 3 dice, and basically it came down to roll-offs. Unfortunately, I didn't win most of the roll-offs, and so Mitchell had a pretty big lead on kill count. So by the time we were second round of combat, he was at around 12 wounds, and I was at around 6 or 7. And basically, he just kept the lead at 6 or 7 kills. And you know, camels generally are very good, like Ian mentioned before. But Mitchell's list didn't really have cavalry. He had a Dragon Knight on horse, and then just the cav with the drum. So I didn't really have very good targets to charge into for the camels. Generally, they're really good at dehorsing enemy mounted models because they can also hit the horse at the same time. There was one opportunity where I could have charged and dismounted his Dragon Knight. His Dragon Knight came around here to try to flank me. I charged 3 camels into him, and only the 3rd camel dehorsed him, and then he rolled a 6 to on his Throne Rider, and I think he killed all 3 camels. So that was a pretty expensive combat for me just to dehorse the Dragon Knight. Close to the end of the game, you know, both sides took casualties here, but I would say that he won most of the roll-offs, and he almost doubled me up until the last turn. So when the last turn was called, neither of us were very close to breaking, but I was able to have one really, I rolled really hot in the last when the last turn was called, and I was able to catch up, and the final score was 23 wounds for him and 17 wounds for me. And neither of us broke, and neither of us wounded each other's leaders, so he won a minor victory of 3-0. Just calculating TPs using the old system. My biggest, I think he played really well, just committing to come down here, and because I didn't do much with these 5 or 6 models. That thinking back, I'm not sure if I should have followed him and looped around. But yeah, that was the game. A little bit frustrating, but very, very tactical, and I think Mitchell did a really good job here against me.
Before we even jump into how the game went, these were definitely the two most beautifully painted armies at the tournament. Like,
Yeah,
beautiful.
I think
Thank
they both won something, right, Charles?
Yeah, Mitchell won best display board, and I was favorite evil army.
Yeah, well deserved to both of you guys. I just played against Mitchell's army in tournament on Saturday, and it just popped. Like, it was so nice. And then I've seen your Herod list before. You took this to Nova, as a version of this to Nova, or was it
Adepticon.
Adepticon? Yeah. And then right after, I think you took it to a tournament to practice for Adepticon, and I played against you. And yeah, it's a stunning army to look at.
Yeah, I do like the matchup too. It's like you got like half trolls going up against Fight 5 Easterlings. I honestly, yeah, and then one's like a 12-inch banner, one's 6-inch. I think it just sounds like it comes down to who rolls the sixes.
It's a good point. Old world filth versus new filth.
Well, it kind of sounds like it came down to who you decided was the good side and who was the evil side for the roll
Yeah.
calls, unfortunately.
Yeah, Charles, you chose wrong.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, because how many rounds of combat did you guys have? Like 3?
3 or 4. That's it.
Yeah, so you just, even if you had sent those, like you're saying, you needed to hold those guys, that reserve force at the back there, until his heroes were committed. And then by the time his heroes were committed, you probably just didn't have enough time anyway for them to run around and get into combat. So, yeah, that's annoying, but yeah, I don't know if there's much else you could have done there. Yeah, you maybe could have committed a turn earlier, but that sounds risky.
Yeah, that's the frustrating thing. That if I had a heroic march that was not on Suladan, I would have done it. I think I would have marched around and tagged him, try to split his army, because then his back flank might not even have had the Fight 5 buff, and my half trolls might have been able to cut through them. So it was just very advantageous for him how he could get basically his whole army in the 6-inch bubble. My ideal combats for me would be him at Fight 4. The banner reroll is unavoidable, but him at Fight 4, I think I would have been able to catch up in kills and maybe won the game. But yeah, that's how it ended.
Still sounds like that last turn. That's a huge comeback. So
I needed one more.
You just needed 1 or 2 more turns.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so Charles, yeah, for your list, I would probably just give it a legend. Like, I think we've talked about it before, haven't we?
Yeah, it's a tweaked version of the list, but it's pretty similar. It's the same alliance.
It's a very, very solid list. It's very hard to fight. It's kind of funny, like, how we talk about there being like there's the theory where you got to have 3 threats, and I think at first glance it looks like your list has the 3 threats of the 2 Mahud Kings and Suladan, but it's actually the heroes, the half trolls, and the Campbells that are all the separate threats. So it's like you have 6 threats. It's a crazy good list. It's a crazy good list at I guess tempo.
Yeah, I'll also give it a hero of legend. I think it is the best possible combo of Herod and Farhad. You have Suladan, who is just easily the most cost-effective hero in the game. You get the shooting from Herod, and then the camels and the half trolls from Farhad, and you still manage to maintain a 40 model count. So yeah, it's the perfect, because 20 points per model average is the optimal amount. I know you and I spoke a bit about some of the changes you made to it, because you had more half trolls in the original version, but because the current meta favors spammy lists a little bit more with some of the new lists, you optimized it for that, and it did really well in the tournament. So
I had more camels in the original list, not more half trolls, but camels are really fragile. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for correcting. No, love it. Hero of legend.
Thank you.
Yeah, same here. Same thing as I think what we talked about. when you brought it to Adepticon. Definitely a tournament winning list. Unfortunately, you came up with a list that might be slightly OP right now, in my opinion. But uh, yeah, and it was still very close.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the interesting thing. I think we were talking about beforehand, and I would have thought you'd have the you would have had the advantage over the duration of like a longer game. But I mean, I guess you didn't play to conclusion either, and then it came down to roll offs. So yeah, that's annoying.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when the whole battle line is dependent on roll-offs, a longer game, it could have gone either way. So, um, I think he did have a slight edge maybe because he had more might than me. So he dictated the moving first. I would say more often than I did. So,
Did he have Rutapi?
yeah, yeah, and
Okay.
Borgir, and then Dragon Knight as
Dragon
well.
Knight.
So
Oh
yeah,
no.
so he had a lot of might. Yeah, but yeah, those have been our 4 games that we've chosen to talk about from Clash on the Coast 2022. It has been fun and definitely a fun tournament that I'm sure we're all going to attend next year.
But I would just one other thing. It was really cool meeting people from just coming like people coming up and talking to us or like, oh, you're on the podcast, right? That was so cool. I don't know if that happened to like I'm assuming it happened to the Lins because you guys are like pretty recognizable. But I don't know. That was really cool just meeting people who like we don't like who like we only kind of know through the podcast. That was really neat.
I brought a friend with me to the tournament, and like fully he like he was like, hey, who do I have to watch out for this tournament? And I was like, oh, like like that's Charles. He actually hosts the the West podcast. He's like, are you serious? I was like, yeah. And he's like, no, like is like the other guys here too? And I pointed them out. So yeah, you guys were celebrity moment there.
Felt so famous. Like, hey, look, Ma, I made it.
uh,
But yeah, that was really cool, and I think obviously we'll all be there next year. So come say hi.
Definitely.
Okay, let's move on to our open topic, which will be playstyles versus points values. So welcome to the open topic of the episode, and we'll be discussing playstyles versus points values. So specifically, we'll kind of go over what playstyles we find are our strengths and that we excel at, and based and also just which points values we prefer and we do better. And so we actually talked about it a little bit offline before this recording, and it was really interesting hearing from Richard and Ben about what they feel like they do better in. So feel free to jump in anytime.
No worries. Yeah. So Richard and I are, I guess, opposites. Richard, I don't think I have ever placed above you at 800 or more points. I've actually never podiumed at an 800 or more point tournament. I've come 5th. Was my best position. So yeah, there you go. 800 points. I always do well. Like I'm always top 10, but I've never podiumed. When it comes to 600 or less points, though, um, I don't want to say always, but I've almost always done better than Richard. Richard's a more consistent player than I am when it comes to podiuming. But yeah, is that fair? Is that a fair comment?
oh yeah, you crush it in lower points, and the cherry on top is my first tournament ever coming back into the hobby after 10 years. First game ever. I'm just like, who is this nice gentleman in front of me? And then Charles is like, oh, that's Ben. He's super nice. I'm like, okay, cool. And then you just wipe the floor with me. I think it was like 500 points of Victoria versus your fiefdoms.
It was 350.
Oh, 350, even smaller. But yeah, I still think about that game to this day. I'm like, oh, I got owned. I got destroyed. But yeah, but even this last year, I think you've won, I think, 2 or 3 events that are like 600 and under.
Yeah, so I played 4 events. 3 of them were 500. One of them was 400. Or sorry, 2 were 500. One was 475, and one was 400. And I've out of the 4, I've won 2, and I've come second in the other 2.
Yeah,
So
and you know, before Ian left, he also said that he tends to do a little bit better in lower points as well. I guess like my question to you guys is, what do you think kind of you know, makes this like, you know, difference? Because we all attend a lot of tournaments, so I feel like our placings are, you know, averaging out to like where I guess we're supposed to. You know, I know there's always going to be variances and whatever, but I think the trend is starting to become obvious. That's why we're having this open topic. But why do you guys think, or what do you think might make this kind of impact?
But
yeah,
Go
you
ahead.
go, Charles. No.
I was just thinking that we decided on this topic because it's this year 2022 where like events started like coming back, where we just have an event almost every month, you know, or every month and a half. You know, everything opened up and you get to compare like, okay, I've attended like 3 tournaments this summer, you know, I tend to do better at, you know, specific ones, whereas before it was like, oh, I played in 3 tournaments this year, you know, like, and you don't, they're farther apart, you don't compare them, you can't really compare them sometimes. So like I really thought about it, and I think that I'm probably better at higher points, and I also enjoy it slightly more. It's, you know, I can't really pinpoint why. Like, part of it might be the play style that I do, and part of it might be the armies that I choose. Because we've done episodes previously on armies that are that excel at low points and armies that excel at high points. They're 2 different open topics. Feel free to go back and check it out. But I think sometimes it's the list that you choose, and sometimes it's just the way you play. So Richard brought up Ian before this, who prefers lower points. You know, he's a very like he has a very strong micro game. You know, he's really focused on model positioning and, you know, getting the most out of each hero. And you know, he's more of a thinker and like slower in making decisions. So maybe that's why like lower model count is stronger for him. But I feel like I play a little more sloppy than him. You know, I find myself making mistakes, and I don't see certain plays in the move phase, for example, and then I let my enemy charge a certain hero when I didn't intend for them to. And I think that's why I think I'm more like I'm less confident in lower point, like 400 or 500 events, and I prefer bigger armies where a single mistake is less likely to hurt you as much and less likely to cost you the game.
It's a good point. Never thought of the like, you know, you only get so many chances, so many mistakes before the game's over. I never thought of that, but yeah, you're right. You get more grace when there's more models on the board. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh yeah. You
No,
know, finish
that's
your
okay.
point.
No, yeah, it's fine. That was it.
Oh, yeah. Just to add on to that, I think I'm very similar too, and that's one thing I noticed. Maybe not necessarily like mistakes and that you can come back from, even though that is part of it. But I think it's more so for me um, what I'm focused on. My positioning is not bad, but yes, I don't think it might not be as like detailed and precise where like I lock out every single model that I need to all the time as much as maybe Ben or Ian. I think my brain what it wants to do constantly is I'm constantly reviewing the battle board and this whole state of the like board and like the objectives, and I'm constantly thinking about how I can get there like big picture wise. And so I think that is generally it seems like a bigger part of the game at higher points. But I would also say, yeah, like list building is huge too, because I think we've talked a lot on the podcast. I like my shenanigans. I like my crazy like monsters or heroes, like that carry me through, through my combats. Like I rarely pick like just like strong infantry frontline and march forward and go frontline to frontline. So um, it's definitely harder to do that at lower points, and like just alliances too in general.
Yeah, whenever Richard says, "Oh, I'm trying a new list," first game I always lose. So like it's got some model like the Watcher or something. I'm like, I don't know how this guy works, and then boof, you get killed. Like, okay, learned a lesson. So yeah, that makes sense. The type of models you like, you love your toys, right? You want the Watcher, you want like with Assault and Lothlorien, you want all the casters. You want to be able to use all the abilities. And you're right, at a big points, you can take everything, but at a small points, you have to choose one, maybe two. And then, yeah, the game changes. I'm not good at multitasking. Like straight up, you ask my wife, I can't multitask at all. If I'm driving, I'm terrible holding a conversation. Whenever like I play games against my brother, like I'm a big Age of Empires player, I will never be as good as my brother. Like 1v1, he will always beat me. I've been practicing and I could beat a lot of my friends, but he can just micromanage and run a lot of things at once. And the same thing with an 800 plus point game. There's so many models on the board. There's so many things to concentrate on. And I struggle more than some players, like more than you two. You guys are both able to keep track of everything that's going on. I do really well when there's less models on the board. If there's only like one, maybe two big threats, there's only 20 to 30 models on the board, I have a way easier time following the pace of the game. And for me, the goals, usually just much easier, right? It's like I played 475 point tournament. You guys both came to that in Seattle. I had 19 models on my list. It was you guys both questioned my choice of list because I didn't put Gilgalad on a horse, but it was Gilgalad on foot with shields, 17 elves, 1 with banner, 6 with bows, the rest with shields and spears, and then I had Círdan, and it was great because Círdan, as soon as I got all his auras up, I just had to focus on a shield wall with the elves, then down the opponent till I got to close combat, and then just Gilgalad slowly each turn. I was like, okay, Gilgalad, this turn, 2 kills. Next turn, Gilgalad, 2 kills. Oh, we're doing a hero combat. Okay, 4 kills. And eventually my opponents ran out of models before I did. So that was, yeah, that seems to work for me.
Yeah, I think at higher points, there's more decision making usually, and it's not just because of higher model count, but also I feel like you have more utility and more your utility and your threats are more spread out. So at lower points, you have like a hero that can do multiple things, buff your warriors and maybe fight and then maybe march, maybe a little bit of magic. But then at higher points, usually there'll be multiple heroes that do multiple things, and I like not putting everything into 1 or 2 models. And I mean, at higher points, you can play that type of list as well, like Verdur or something like that. But I find that generally at higher points, there's more things to keep track of, and I like that part, and I feel like it feels more strategic. Although I know people who think lower points value is more strategic, so I guess it comes down to the player. But I like those macro decisions in armies, and less of the model positioning and moving and blocking on a small battle line, in comparison.
Yeah, I definitely agree that I think the times that I've heard that lower points is more strategic is like more for list building, because you can't take everything and you need to decide like what you need to bring, and some things are going to get left out. Whereas like higher points, you just take everything. But I think play wise, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I think, like you said, Charles, that higher points play may be more strategic, and then lower points might be more tactical, where it awards like tighter play.
Yeah, definitely. Which, yeah, I don't know. Like the game I did against you, right? You had three or four casters in your assault list, and plus you had the warg, plus you had the bats, plus you had the spiders, and I was like, okay, I got to do this to like ward off this. I got to do this to ward off this. Got to do this to ward off this. And then you're like, okay, Shroud of Shadows, spider walked through your battle line, sniped bulk, and I was like I couldn't keep up with the number of things I had to keep track of. So it was yeah, I think you're right. What would you say to the idea that there are certain lists that work better at higher or lower points? Like, do you think if you were to think of your guys' play style, would you play the same faction even at a higher or lower points, or do you guys find you take different factions when you change your points levels?
I personally noticed that I actually recently, whenever I'm thinking lower points, I tend to go legendary legions, or something that I think allows me to get a strong core bonus with a small unit of guys. I think a lot of bonuses in this game, I feel like, don't scale up with numbers. And like one of my lower point go-to lists is Halls of Thranduil. Like that 6-inch or 3-inch +1 to wound bubble around Thranduil, that's never going to scale, no matter how many elves you have around, right? So once you have that, like, maybe like 3 elves on each side, you're likely not going to get any more. So at 800 points, personally, I would never go a pure Halls of Thranduil. I know it's playable, but to me, that's not min-maxing. But in a 500 or under, I would look to that list and say, oh, this could be a top tier list. Because if most of or a good chunk of my elves can get a +1 to wound, that is very strong.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's actually, I wasn't even thinking of that example, but the Halls of Thranduil was a perfect example for that. Yeah. How about you, Charles? I don't think I've ever seen you bring Corsairs to an 800 point tournament before.
Yeah, so I think it's just recently where I've been liking armies with larger body counts, larger model counts. So at low points, I like to get that advantage of not having to worry about breaking early on, and I tend to lean. I think you guys know I tend to lean into more skewed lists. So armies that have like 1 or 2 really big strengths and then a clear weakness. And I feel like at higher points I can lean into that more. Like assault upon Helm's Deep I brought to Nova. I could at 800 points I could lean into those siege engines, like took 3 ballista, but I wouldn't be able to really make that list work. I've played it at 600 with 1 ballista, 1 bomb, and it's not the same. It doesn't feel like it gives me the room to write the list that I want to play. At lower points, yeah. So at lower points, I tend to try to play like an army that hits hard, but is not super easy to break. That's so. I don't know what other lists can be like the Corsairs of Umbar, but I really enjoyed playing that this year. And if I were to play another low point tournament, I think I would lean into the same type of list, something that hits hard but also like has decent numbers, which Which you just played a tournament with a list like that. Your Hunter Orcs.
Yeah, that was 100% I like playing lists that nobody else plays. So, my Azog's Legion, I know I'm never going to play against, rarely going to play against an Azog's Legion when I bring it to a tournament. But yeah, Azog's Hunters, I've never seen them podium before. And so I built the list literally in one sitting, submitted it, and was like, let's see how this goes. And then you and I discussed the list after the tournament, and you had I think some pretty valid corrections that would have improved it. But I took the tournament. I managed to beat Halls of Thranduil. I beat a Mordor list with the Witch King and Shagrat. I beat a Easterling and Khand Alliance, and then I beat the Easterling Legendary Legion, which I mean, it was just an objective capture scenario, and I had 35 models at 500 points, so I definitely had the model count. But I do have to give it to my opponent. Rolled horribly. The first 3 turns of combat, he only rolled like 2 6s. And when you have 2 Hunter Orcs fighting 1 guy, if you lose that fight 4 dice, like you're taking a wound. So there was a lot of luck that went into winning in that game as well against the Legendary Legion. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a glass cannon army, which I love glass cannon armies, as I said at the start. 35 models, the entire army is defense 4, 3 heroes with 2 wounds, 1 fate, defense 5, fight 4, fight 5. If I start taking wounds, I die. But every model had 2 attacks and a strength of 4, so if I win fights, I kill. So it worked.
Big fan of that list.
Oh, it was so fun. I've never taken that faction to a tournament before, and I would again after that. Yeah. But yeah, I like for myself, I guess if I were to answer my own question, yes, I definitely changed lists. I don't think I've ever taken Azog's Legion at a low points before. I find it very hard to build a good list when your cheapest hero is 175 points on a Warg, and he's only got 15. And then so if you want to get Azog, he's 215 points. So I'm like, man, like I haven't been able to build a list. And I'm sure they exist, and I'm sure there's some really cool combos you can do for that. But yeah, no, I think at the tournament I came second in was Toss. I took Minas Tirith and Assault and Helm's Deep. You're absolutely right, Charles. Assault and Helm's Deep at 400 points was terrible. I won the game 2 points to 1. I got lucky on the last turn. But Minas Tirith, it was beautiful. Richard literally was on the receiving end of that list, and it worked very well at low points. But yeah, I did that. I did Rivendell at low points. It worked well. I've done Azog's Hunters at low points. It did well. And the last one was, it was Moria at the Battle for Smog, where Charles, I think 12-0'd me in the final game. So yeah, that was a hard lesson to learn. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's funny. Coming to think of it, I don't think I've ever taken the same faction twice in the last 2 years to a low points tournament. I always change it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing about low points tournaments. Like, right, they're easy to paint up, and you can try something different every tournament. So I get the appeal of that.
And I would argue there's probably more viable factions, including Legendary Legions. You know, like stuff like Helm Hammerhand. I know people would probably argue with me, but it just doesn't work at a certain points level. And you know, I think there's probably a bunch more like that. Like even like the ones that are like, I think I wouldn't say semi-competitive, but playable. Like maybe the Mirkwood Elves, Mirkwood Bows Legendary Legion as well. Like you're never gonna play that at 800.
I fully agree. There are a lot of factions that are, I don't know. Yeah, I think there are very few factions, I think to your point, that scale the other way. Right? Like the few would be like the Depths of Moria. You're not going to take the Depths of Moria to a 400 or 500 point tournament. You're not going to take the Vanquishers or the Necromancer to a 400 or 500 tournament. But there's just a few niche cases. But you're right. Yeah, they usually scale up worse than they scale down. Yeah.
So one thing that might be slightly out of the scope of this, but it seems like at least locally, our smaller points are usually less games as well, like 3 or 4 games max, whereas our 800 points tend to go the 2-day, 5-game tournaments. Does that play any like part of it where you're probably going to be playing more like more of the player pool, you know, the scenario pool versus like the smaller point ones?
That's a good point. So yeah, like you're saying, 4 games versus 5 games. I think for me, I've noticed, after 4 straight games, people start to make a lot of mistakes on the 4th game. I do, but I haven't this year especially. I haven't been making a lot of mistakes later games. So I think maybe my stamina is just a little bit better than some of the people I played against. I think with 2-day games, people, I don't know. There's always an after party. They go drinking. Sometimes people are like, "Oh man, so many nice painted armies on day one. I gotta go paint." And I've definitely seen people who are like, who show up, bags under their eyes, and I'm like, "What did you do last night?" And they're like, "Dude, I got to bed at 4. I woke up like 2 hours ago." So I think, as silly as it is, but yeah, I think yeah, you're right. There are that does come into play. I also think that having that 5th game, because there's only 6 pools to choose from, you really see the metal of your list the more pools you roll from, right? Because you could have a list, like a perfect example would be that Battle for Smog. I chose a Moria list, right? Durbers, a Cave Troll, a Shaman, and then just a spam of goblins. And I scored I did a 12-0, a 10-0, and then I think a draw actually was one of my games, but it did very well. All the scenarios, I could capture objectives, I could beat in Lords of Battle, I could beat in like Fog of War. As soon as I matched up against Charles in Contest of Champions, though, Dalmir versus Durbers, it's not a good matchup. So I think you start to see more about what your list's not good at the more pools you draw from. So I think that's a good point as well. If you're like me, where you build super niche lists, they're like, this is super, like, it's super good at this, it's not good at this. Small tournaments are easier because you're less likely to get something bad.
Yeah, I know that we always go into tournaments like with a pretty competitive mindset, but in a way, smaller tournaments with less games feel a little more casual to me, just because you're like, okay, it's only 3 games today, it's only 4 games today. I might not even play the armies I'm most afraid of. I might not even play one of the top players. I might just pass all of them and go for podium. Like you don't know. For 2 days, 5 or 6 games, it's almost impossible to avoid like a top player or one of the armies or one of the scenarios that you don't want to play. So I definitely think that 1-day tournaments feel a little more casual, even though you could still be really competitive and you could still go in to try to win, and the better players obviously have a way better chance at winning. But to me, there's just a little bit more of a randomness.
Yeah, that's fair. I still prefer lower points just because like it's easy. I mean, yes, on top of the fact that I seem to be able to play better at them. I mean, the 1-day commitment is easier, especially if you're crossing the border, you're driving. And yeah, like you said, it's easier to throw together a list and get it ready to go. But yeah, you are right with the 2-day tournaments. I think the final thing I'll say that I do prefer about 2-day tournaments, or at least like 5+ game tournaments, and this showed up much to Richard's dismay at the GT. I actually like that you don't have to win all your games to win the tournament. I like that you can just have one really bad matchup, right? Maybe you have Galadriel and the opponent has the Balrog, and you get Contest of Champions. And maybe you just play really well, you mitigate it, you take a minor loss, you know you're not going to win that game. But you can still win the tournament just because you're a really skilled player. Like, if you only have 4 games to play off of, like, every single 4-game tournament I've gone to, the person who wins the tournament won all 4 of their games. But as we proved at the GT, the person who won 4 out of 5. So I do like that. Sorry,
Yeah.
what were you going to say?
Oh no, oh for sure. Like I think even though I think I'm on the other side of the camp that I prefer larger points, I think it would be very interesting to try maybe like a 2-day GT that is like maybe a 500-600 points. I think, I believe like the UK does that quite often. So yeah, it would be interesting even if it is not my forte. Oh,
Sorry, muted. I have an interesting theory, and I'm not a great tournament organizer because I've organized all of 0, soon to be 1, but 0 tournaments. What if next year we did 1 tournament that was a 2-day tournament, but it was like 400 or 500 points? And hear me out.
8 games.
Yes. No, I'm not kidding. 8 games, 7 or 8 games. It's easy to fit 4 in one day. Like, we've no problem. It's not a long day with 4 games at 400 or 500 points. But our biggest complaint is that at 800, like the 800-point games, you get more games in, so it's more balanced. So what if you actually had the time to fit more than 5 games in? Would that not, in theory, be the most balanced? I don't know. Food for thought.
We'll have to try it out, and maybe Ben, maybe that'll be your favorite after that.
Maybe. Yeah. Who knows? If I win it, then yes. If I lose, then back to 1 place. No, sorry.
Fair enough.
No.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. Very, very, very interesting conversations and discussions, and also just talking about our games from a great tournament.
Yeah, thank you. This was so fun. I'm super honored to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. It's nice to get some of our strong local players onto our podcast. I also want to shout out Max for actually hosting Clash on the Coast. I think he appeared on episode 11 with the Witch King. But yeah, he kind of just had a vision, hosting a big convention on the West Coast. And yeah, it's amazing. And I think like there's already talks about next year being 60, 70 players. So yeah, if anyone is interested, even if you're on the East Coast or you want to travel in, we'd love to have you on the West Coast of Canada here. But yeah, it was definitely a great event.
Yeah.
It was the Emerhill episode that he was on.
Right.
He has a 3D printing company, and he uses that to run the tournament. If you know Max from his print shop, MTM Printworks, that's the Max that's hosting this Clash on the Coast. So definitely give it a shot if you can come out this way. It'll be great next year. And
It was first class. It was awesome.
Yeah, he had lots of prizes and even like gift bags of like just models from his shop. So it was great.
Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. Look forward to the next episode of Into the West podcast.